afternoon. I'm Chief Richard Myers of the Newport News Police Department. I appreciate your patience. I know we've kept you waiting for a few minutes. I just left a briefing with a group of concerned pastors from the community. We initiated contact with several of them early this morning, and they had requested the opportunity to meet with us. And so we felt it was important that we extend them the courtesy of meeting on their request, and it went a little long, so we apologize for keeping you all. With me up front is Mayor McKinley Price, City Manager Jim Borey, and Dr. Sandra Cherry, who primarily in this context is wearing the hat of one of our police chaplains, who was at the scene along with several other chaplains. She also, of course, is a member of our city council. I'd like to open first by extending our deep condolences to the family of Mr. Beatty, who expired this morning. It's always a tragic situation when there's a loss of life, no matter what the circumstances, and we certainly extend to them our deepest sympathies. We certainly, as a police department and as a community, struggle with the ongoing presence of guns in our community and the ensuing violence that results from that, and we will not let go of working tirelessly to reduce gun violence in our community. We also want to thank our community for calm in the light of what's been going on around the country and the extreme focus on police-related shootings. We are very sensitive to the concerns of the community. I think the fact that we were able to just meet with a group of pastors reflects that. We are going to do everything we can to put facts out to the community in as timely a manner as we can, as transparently as we can, due to the obvious interest based on national events. But we also appreciate the community stepping up and showing patience and calm as we have to take time to find the facts. As most of you in the media know, oftentimes initial information that is reported, once you begin investigating and drilling down, it turns out to be quite different than the initial information. We have to strike that balance of trying to be proactive and transparent in putting information out there, but we want to be accurate and factual, and sometimes that just takes time. So we hope to strike that balance to the best of our ability. What we know at this point is as follows. At approximately shortly before 1 o'clock this morning, a detective in our organized crime division, who normally does not work uniform patrol, was working a uniformed extra duty assignment at the Stewart Gardens housing complex. Now, extra duty assignments in Newport News are when officers are hired off duty to come provide a uniform presence, to provide extra security. Sometimes these are one-time events for special events or so on. In this case, this housing complex regularly employs extra duty officers to provide an extra layer of security in that vicinity. This officer received information from a well-known and reliable source, the information being about a specific individual who was walking in the area armed with a sawed-off shotgun. The officer, this is the second time in about as many days that information came in about this individual carrying a weapon. Approximately 1 or 2 days previously, similar information came in, and a different group of officers who were on duty had contact with this person and also did a consent search at a location nearby where the person had been previously and reported to have had at least 1 or more weapons, and no weapons were found at that time. Moving up to this morning, when the detective got that information, he then contacted and requested additional officers to assist him in making contact with the person suspected of being armed with the sawed-off shotgun. My understanding is at that time, and it's consistent with the time of the day and a Friday evening, there weren't immediately available any South Precinct patrol officers, so a nearby canine officer who is not assigned to any given precinct but is available as a citywide resource, and a South Precinct patrol sergeant both responded to the area to assist. Prior to going to the vicinity where the person was reported to be, the 3 officers met in the Stewart Gardens area to have a brief discussion about their tactics and how to approach the subject who was reported to be armed. This action reflects that the officers wanted to be tactically sound and maximize not only their safety but the safety of the community, rather than in an unorganized fashion just roll up and confront someone. They then proceeded to the area of Oak and 18th, where they observed 2 persons, one of whom matched the description of the person reported to be armed with the shotgun. As the officers parked their vehicles and were exiting, the subject who was described as being armed broke away and headed in a different direction, heading up Peterson Place, I believe it's called, and began walking away and pretty much ignoring the presence of the officers. The officers called out indicating they needed to speak to the person, and again he ignored the presence of the officers and at some point began running away from the officers. At that point, the officers pursued him on foot eastbound towards the Peterson Yacht Basin, which is where that short street pretty much dead ends into that water area. One of the officers has reported to us observing that one of the arms, the coat and the arm of the person who was running was held in a rather rigid or stiff fashion, which led that officer at least to believe that this person might have something hidden up the sleeve of their coat based on the way they were holding their arm and moving. As officers continued to pursue the subject and they came close to him, at one point he turned and was turning towards at least one of the officers, and that's the point at which the officers report to us that they observed a sawed-off shotgun in his hand. The officers have indicated, and we have an independent witness who did not eyewitness this, but verbally confirmed hearing at least 1 or possibly 2 officers shouting orders, drop the weapon, drop the weapon. Shortly after that, 1 officer fired 3 rounds from their duty weapon, and we know obviously at least one of those rounds struck the decedent. We have recovered all 3 of the shell casings from the officer's duty weapon. At that point, the decedent dropped, and the officers immediately summoned medical aid, and the medics responded and pronounced the decedent dead at the scene. He was not transported to the hospital due to the absence of any signs of life and the nature of the injury. We will rely on the medical examiner to tell us if more than one round struck the decedent. At this point, that's really not our level of medical expertise. It's up to the medical examiner to do the autopsy and indicate what their findings were. After the person was pronounced deceased, we secured the crime scene, and additional resources began arriving for the officers to conduct an investigation and preserve the crime scene so that our forensic unit could come in. Approximately a couple of feet from where the decedent's feet were was the sawed-off shotgun. It was recovered. We have since learned from checking the records that this shotgun was reported stolen out of a burglary, I believe a burglary in an adjoining jurisdiction. We're still actively working that aspect, and we are also going to be requesting ATF's assistance in whatever tracking we can do and learn what we can about the shotgun. At probably an hour or 2 into this incident, we contacted the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Mr. Gwynn responded to the scene, and he and I had conversation at that scene, and we are making sure that we will fully cooperate with Mr. Gwynn's office's wishes on any aspects of the investigation. Now, as you may know, anytime we have an officer-involved incident, there are 2 distinct investigations that are conducted. On one hand, as if any incident of violence where there is deadly force involved and or a loss of life, we do a thorough and complete criminal investigation, which will gather all the evidence and facts, and ultimately that investigation is turned over to the Commonwealth Attorney, and under his responsibilities, Mr. Gwynn and his office will determine if the actions of the officer was lawful and appropriate, and so that's the criminal case. And those investigations, if done properly, can take a little while, and we have every intention of being exhaustive in the investigation. On the other hand, and completely disassociated with the criminal investigation, is our internal investigation. That is done where we explore if the officers involved actions were consistent with our training policies and procedures. Obviously, our policies and training are based upon what the law says and best practices, and being an accredited agency, the standards adopted, the international standards of best practices for police departments. Now, it's important for you to understand the distinction on these 2 investigations, because on the criminal investigation, we follow the same route we do with any other investigation, and the constitutional privileges and rights that apply to any citizen apply to the police officers involved, of course. However, on the internal investigation, under the law, police departments can compel employees to answer questions about their conduct in relation to policies and procedures. However, any information that comes out under compulsion pertaining to policies cannot be used in a criminal case without a very specific set of warnings that are given to the officers so that they know that their constitutional rights still apply, and they can refuse to answer on a constitutional basis on the criminal case. They cannot refuse to answer on the internal investigation. So we keep those two investigations as far apart as we can, and in fact, in some cases, even postpone certain activities on the internal investigation until the criminal proceeds to a place where we will not jeopardize in any way. This is where it's very important for us to stay in contact and coordination with the Commonwealth Attorney so that we stay in bounds and not do anything to jeopardize that investigation. A few other details I'd like to provide. Again, given the context of the national scene and locally reflecting our philosophy and our attempts to be the kind of police department that heavily relies and draws on collaboration and partnership throughout our community. Since very early this morning, we have been in contact with a number of the pastors throughout the South